And here he is, Mr. John Lee Dumas. Hello, welcome to Scotland.
Listen, I am fired up to be here. I will officially have the lamest accent on this entire show. So thank you for putting up with my Northeastern American accent here. And I'm coming at you live, though, from Puerto Rico, where the sun is shining, the birds are singing, life is good. And I'm excited to be here. The food's not quite as good as Alan's restaurant from back in the day when I was in Edinburgh, just loving life. But, things can only be so good.
Well, I was actually going to share with everyone how this interview came to be.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because it's a quite hell of a story, I would say. We just got a little bit of a positive message to it. So as you know, John Lee Dumas is known worldwide. He done it all. He interviewed pretty much anybody who made anything, done anything successful in terms of business. He made a lot of money in his life. And, you would think that when someone does it all, you wouldn't be able to talk to them like a human being. So one day during the shift that I was working at in the restaurant, I was preparing for the service. I was listening to the podcast, and John mentioned that he's coming to Europe for a big road trip with his fiance now. Congratulations, by the way, on that one. Yes, I said, what if I just invited him to the restaurant? And I invited him through Instagram. I said, hey, why don't you come in for lunch? Obviously, I don't want anything from you. Usually people want something in exchange. They want money, they want something. I said, I don't want anything. I just want to shake your hand, exchange a few words, and say that, I met you. And he said yes. He was lovely and he was nice, and we arranged this, and he came to Scotland. We got to meet each other and spend a little bit of time, and you're a human being, John.
Sometimes I pinch myself and I'm just like, ow, that hurts. I can remember that Instagram message very clearly. That's kind of one of the interesting hacks, by the way, is like you can literally get into most people's DMs on Instagram. I mean, it's becoming less so, as it becomes more of a massive platform. But back in the day, especially, I mean, it was one of those things where, I'd be doing stories. I was walking through Edinburgh. Kate and myself went on this great run up. Is it called King Arthur's Seat? Is that
yes, it is.
That's the official name that I remember. Beautiful, beautiful hike there. Looking back into the city and just loving it. And then getting a message being like, hey, you're in my city. My restaurant's here. Like, I'd love to come host you. And I'm like, oh, that's only 0.3 miles from my Airbnb. Let's do it, man. And I loved it. And we actually made a point. We did 17 countries. That trip that we did, it was a 75-day European trek. And we did 17 countries, and we really tried to meet up with a Fire Nation fan. So a fan of Entrepreneurs on Fire, Fire Nation, at least once on every single stop. And sometimes we met up with a couple. In fact, in Dublin, we had a little dinner downtown, which was so much fun with multiple people. Again, and it was all last minute because I didn't announce where I was going. I would just get there. Then I would post hey, what a beautiful city I'm in right now. And then people would be like, you're in my city. That's super cool. And we had such a blast, so much fun. And, getting to hang out with locals is always the best. In fact, Gavin and his girlfriend took us down the coast of Scotland, and we got to see some areas we never would have seen because we didn't have a car. So, we just jumped in their car and we drove down and saw some really cool areas. And, that's kind of my philosophy in life. It's go with the flow as far as, so many people are trying to pull life towards them when sometimes it's just push and just go with the flow and see where it takes you, whether it be business, whether it be relationships, whether it be travel, something that I ask myself personally, and this is in all things, this is in business, this is in life, this is in relationships. I say, does this feel heavy or does this feel light? And if it feels heavy, if a relationship feels heavy, on your soul, on your heart, if a business feels heavy, if an appointment feels heavy, if anything feels heavy, maybe it's time to release that because, most things that are worth doing in this life that are right for you, they feel light. You know, they feel like there's some passion in there. There's some excitement in there. There's some enthusiasm in there. And we live in a world where we get that choice, which is amazing, because frankly, 100 years ago and all the time before, there was a lot less choice than we have today. So I think we need to take advantage of it.
Speaking of choice, I've got a question that is not on my list of questions, actually, that I was kind of wondering to ask you because of the fact of the choices that we make. You're very selective. You're on a tight schedule. You're real productive, and you're selective about who you talk to and how long you talk to the people. And my question was, and that could also apply to that meeting where I messaged you on Instagram, and now for a little Startup Grind Scotland event, why did you say yes? What made you say yes?
Well, number one, yes, I have a busy schedule. You can see, here's my calendar today, back to back, early to evening. You know, I'm just looking to get out there and share, you know, value in the areas that I can, to listen where I can, you know, to help people where I can. And one reason why, you know, or I should say, when people ask me like, why, after me producing over 3,000 episodes with Entrepreneurs on Fire, after working for a decade, interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs, creating this podcast that has over 100 million listens, over 1.4 million listens every single month, growing a business that's a multi-million-dollar a year media empire. Like, why do I keep like grinding, and why do I keep putting in the work and putting in the effort? And the answer has always been easy for me. It's the ripple effect. Like, I love the fact that right here, Alan, you know, we have, let's just look at it right now. There's 26 participants here. There's going to be more people that will watch this after the fact. There might be some people watching live elsewhere. And, you know, and to me, it's, what if one person, just one person that's watching this here today was inspired by one thing that I shared. And now that person goes off and they start and create something that they otherwise would not have started or created. And now that thing inspires a whole host of individuals that have never heard of John Lee Dumas, that have never heard of Entrepreneurs on Fire, that have never heard of Startup Grind Scotland. But now those host of people are being inspired, and maybe some of them do something that they might not otherwise have done, and are inspiring a whole other host of individuals. And now you have what I call the ripple effect. You have a second, third, fourth, fifth, sometimes even 6 degrees of really influence on these individuals that they have no connection back to you. They don't know it. You hope it happens, and you might not even know it. But to me, like, that makes this world such an amazing place. Like, I love the fact that every now and then I get an email, literally, that says, John, I'm listening to episode 324. I recorded that episode back in 2013. It's 2021 now, but that person's emailing me today in 2021, thanking me for an episode that I recorded with Seth Godin back in 2013, because it inspired them today. Because for them, it's real content today. And now they're going to go off and do something. And I love that evergreenness. Like, I love that ability of the ripple effect. Like, I just love that world that we live in. And that's why I keep doing what I do, because I know that even if it just affects one person, it's worth it. And I think that's so important for people today when, you know, they look at like entrepreneurs that they may admire, you know, like, I'm not saying you admire Kim Kardashian, but like, you look at like the numbers that she has on Instagram and at Twitter, you're like, I'll never get that many followers, or I'll never have that many likes. Like, that's just like the fake numbers. What's real is like the 1 or the 5 or the 10 people that your message, that your story can really impact, can really make a change with, that could then go on to have this exponential ripple effect that we're talking about right now. Like, that's powerful. Because believe me, when we all start, myself included, we're all speaking to an empty room. Everybody's speaking to an empty room at first. And then slowly and surely, that room gets filled with your followers, with your fans, with your audience. And then it grows from there. And the thing that I want to end on before I pass it back to Alan is, well, how do you really know if you're doing it right? You're doing it right when you're providing the single best solution to a real problem. That's when you know you're doing it right. It's when you are providing the number one best solution to a real problem in this world, because people will beat a path to your door when you are providing the best solution to a real problem. Nobody wants the second best solution. Nobody wants the 10th best solution. They want the best solution to a real problem. And this is really well exemplified, by the way, in this Tim Ferriss story that I really do love. He says, hey, if you want to become good at like any Olympic sports, just literally go to like the Instagram page of the silver medalist in that sport. Because guess what? Nobody cares about the silver medalist. Literally, it's sad, but it's true. All the adulation, all of the advertising dollars, all the sponsorships, it all goes to the gold medalist. The gold medalist gets everything. That gold medalist might have won by like a 1/100th of a second. Yet they get everything. And the silver medalist, the bronze medalist, they get nothing. Those individuals are still world class. They might have lost again by 1/100th of a second or by like 6 inches on a javelin throw or whatever it is. And now you can literally hire this silver medalist for next to nothing because nobody's knocking on their door, but you can. That's just kind of a visual way, a visual story of sharing with you. Like, you've got to be the best because disproportionate success, disproportionate earnings and winnings and everything comes to number one. That's the truth on Google search results. That's the truth on the best podcast, the best YouTube show. The best solution to a real problem gets disproportionate and exponential results, period.
That is absolutely powerful. And for those who hear John for the first time, I just want to say, whenever he comes to the room, it just lifts up the spirit. And I think that is what makes you the best in podcasting. Is I mentioned this when we met, that phrase at the beginning of a podcast, which asks people, are you ready to ignite? It brings the energy level in a person, and that's how you do it. And also,
right there. Are you prepared to ignite? It's right there.
Exactly.
And right before you move on to the next thing, I want to just make a final point on what you're sharing. There's a great, and anybody can Google this. I'll even drop it in the chat here in a second, unless someone else who wants to type it here for me. It's called 68 Pieces of Unsolicited Advice. And if you Google that, Kevin Kelly on his 68th birthday wrote these 68 pieces of unsolicited advice. They're all fantastic. This guy, 68 years old. He's so successful for so long. And one of them, specifically to your point, Alan, really jumped out at me because it's such a reason why I won at such an early stage in my business, even though I didn't know this truth. But now I can look at it, which is so important, which is enthusiasm is worth 25 IQ points. Like, just think about that. Like, this is a quote that he wrote that he's found to be so true. Enthusiasm is worth 25 IQ points. Listen, you may not be the smartest person in the room. You may not be the best X or Y or Z in the room, but you can be the most enthusiastic. And when you're enthusiastic, like, things just change. Like, literally, nobody wants to go on and to hear some droll, boring person. Alan, are you prepared to ignite? Like, who's going to listen to that podcast? Was I corny? Was I cheesy? Yes, to all of those things. But I was going to be corny and cheesy and enthusiastic to such a level that my guest, who maybe was having a bad day or maybe just wasn't that enthusiastic of a person naturally, which is fine, was going to get lifted up. So like you said, Alan, like I lift people up in this room, or I lift people up when I come into a room. Like, I really take that as an amazing compliment because, and I know you meant it as one, so thank you. But like, it's so true, my friends. Like, you can be that beacon of light. It's just by enthusiasm. And like, listen, I don't walk around like always enthusiastic. Like, I'll get off this call, I'm going to go curl up, on this Chase lounge with my dog, Gus. I won't talk for an hour. I'll be sipping on tea. I'll be very introverted too. Like, believe me, I can be introverted and I can like not want to engage with people. But when I know that, it's time to turn it on, I can turn it on, and you can too. And like, again, that quote by Kevin Kelly, enthusiasm is worth 25 IQ points. Like, just remember that next time you're in a room with people and, they're looking to you for advice or for thoughts or for just whatever. I mean, when people walk into a room and they are the light of the room, they do bring the energy level up. people always will resonate with that. And you can make that happen.
Amazing. So guys, just wanted to let you know that John requested that we have lots of interaction today. So it's not just one-way interview where I just ask questions, John's answers. You have a Slido survey that Emma is going to pop in the chat. You can ask questions, you make comments, you can state your opinions in the chat. And at the end, there's going to be a Q&A where we bring people onto the stage and they will be able to ask the question to John. Personally, all you got to do is just make sure you put your name next to the question so we know it was you. And Emma will take care of you. We'll get you ready before you get to ask your question with John. And I am going to bring it to the beginning and ask you, John, about the time before Entrepreneurs on Fire. And I know you come from Maine, which is relatively small. And, you know, Scotland and Scottish entrepreneurial community is also very small. So I thought maybe you could share with us what it was like coming up from like a small community and then getting to the big world of business and talking to the big guns and like getting, you know, onto the world stage, I would say.
Absolutely. Great question. And to your point, which you started with, I'd love to get there as soon as possible because we have some amazing people in the audience right now. Like I'd love if people were bold. Fortune favors the bold. Let's get you up on stage. Let's unmute your mics. Ask me any question that you have about business, about life, about whatever it might be. We can have a very meaningful conversation. Like I love answering people's direct questions. That can be a very huge help. So I definitely want to get there, you know, as soon as we can so we can get through a good number of people. So listen, back in Maine, very small town, very rural. Loved it. There's a reason why the Maine is, our motto is the way life should be, because it's a great living. It's a great life. You know, it's everybody knows your name. I mean, you live in a town of 2,000, 3,000 people. It's a very small rural part of the United States of America. Now, one thing that's a problem with that, unfortunately, is that I looked around at one stage and I said, hey, I know that I'm the average of the 5 people I spend the most time with. And I'm in a lot of circles with just very not like high level thinking individuals. Like they were just satisfied to go in, put in the 8 hours, grind it out till retirement, and then drift off into the sunsets. There just didn't seem to be that many individuals that were really after just up-leveling their life, about chasing massive success, about adding real, awesome, exciting value to this world. And I knew from all the books that I was reading, and I love the Jim Rohn quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I realized that a lot of people I was spending time with were Debbie Downers and Don Doolittles. And that needed to change. Like they weren't bad people. Again, they were good people, but they just weren't the kind of people that I wanted to be an average of, frankly. And that's when, you know, I was really able to up-level my 5, so to speak. And I did that the best way by launching a podcast. Because now, you know, I'm having one-on-one conversations with Tim Ferriss, with Gary Vaynerchuk, with Seth Godin, with Barbara Corcoran, you know, with all these unbelievable, inspiring entrepreneurs. And all of a sudden, the majority of my day is being spent with the world's most successful entrepreneurs. And that became my average, not these other people that I was hanging out with. And I was hanging out with less and less because this business was taking more and more of my time. And so now all of a sudden my average completely flipped. Whereas like before it was like a pretty low average. Now it's like the people I'm spending time with are 7s, 8s, 9s, 10 out of 10 on success, on enthusiasm, on, you know, just like go getting, you know, having the go getter attitude, like all these things. And it was rubbing off on me, whether I wanted it to or not. And so that's why I love what you're doing here, you know, with Startup Grinds. And that's one of the reasons why it was an easy yes to come and talk to you guys here today, because this is what you're doing. Everybody here is upping their average. You are surrounding yourself virtually here today on the Zoom call, with amazing people, with enthusiastic people, with people that want more, that are willing to put in the grind, that are willing to strive, that are willing to make things happen. And that's who you want to be surrounding yourself with. Because again, whether you like it or not, and I know you guys like it, which is why you're here, your average is going up. There's a reason why I end every single one of my episodes by saying, hey, you've been chatting with Alan and JLD today, and you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So keep up the heat, because I want you to know this hour that we spend together, your average is going up. So keep up that momentum, keep up that heat. You spend 30 minutes listening to Entrepreneurs on Fire. You are literally spending time with me and some other inspiring, successful entrepreneur. Keep up the heat. You need to do this. This is why, in this book that I'm so passionate about, we'll talk a little bit more about later. Step 6, chapter 6 is all about creating and joining your own mastermind. It is so critical. And believe me when I say nobody, and I mean nobody, does a mastermind the right way. Like, this teaches you the right way to do it. Some of you aren't going to want to hear what I break down in there for how to run a mastermind the right way, and you won't do it, and that's fine. But those of you that follow the step-by-step process on creating and or joining the right mastermind and running it the right way, your life will change.
Thanks. That's amazing. I will actually talk about the book and the path itself in a moment. What I want to ask you, because I know that you're not afraid to promote yourself, and I want to touch on this in terms of mindset and your self-talk. And there's a tricky thing that every entrepreneur trying to raise their average is going to have to overcome, is how do you stay humble enough to be a learner, and at the same time how to be audacious enough and believe in yourself enough to promote your stuff, to sell your stuff, to just pound it and pound it. So on one side you have to be arrogant, on the other side you have to stay humble. And how do you do this? Because it's a tricky thing to do.
Yeah, I think arrogance is the wrong word. I think the right word, frankly, is confidence. And you should be confident if you're doing exactly what I was sharing earlier. If you are creating the number one solution to a real problem in this world, it's almost like, how can you withhold that from people? Like, when you have the best solution to a real problem, what are you not going to shout up from the rooftops? Are you going to be like, I have the best solution to a real problem? Or are you going to be like, I have the best solution to a real flipping problem? Here it is. It's like, if you create, like the number one vaccine to COVID, and it's the best, are you going to like go and whisper to your friends? Or are you going to be like, let's get this over with. I've got the best solution to a real problem. Let's get this out to the flipping world. And if you feel about like that, about your product, about your service, about your solution to a real problem, you're going to win. And we've got to stop with this mindset thing. And like, listen, I'm just going to be honest. Like, when I got on this call and somebody was sharing at the very end, and then, I think it might've been you, Alan, that came on, or somebody else, and said, hey, that's about as close as like a Scottish, person comes to bragging about themselves or something. I was like, listen, enough with the generalizations. Like, don't stop generalizing Scottish this, Irish that, American this, European that. It's like, no, it's like, if you truly believe you have the best solution to a real problem, you need to have the confidence within yourself to scream it from the rooftops. Otherwise, you don't have the best solution to a real problem. And both consciously and subconsciously, you're going to whisper it into a corner because it's not the best. And that is the simple reality. The most successful entrepreneurs that I've interviewed over the past decade have been able and willing to look themselves in the mirror and say, you know what? I don't have the cure for world hunger. I'm not claiming that. But what I am claiming is that I found a niche. I found a void in the marketplace. I saw something that was not the best solution that could possibly exist in this one area. And I came in and I created the best solution to this one thing in this one area. And now you can't hold me back from telling everybody, because why would I hold it back? Like, it would be an embarrassment to myself. I would be disappointed with myself. I owe it to the world to share this with the world. And again, the solution is not going to be for everybody. It's going to be for those people who have that problem. Real quick, what does that look like in my world? Back in 2012, I wanted to create a podcast. That was my big idea. Okay. That would have failed because there was thousands of podcasts. So I niched down and I said, well, what about business podcasts? Okay, well, there's hundreds of them. That would fail. Let me niche down again. Okay, what about a business podcast that interviews entrepreneurs? Okay, there's 7 of them. Do I want to be the 8th best podcast interviewing entrepreneurs? No, thank you very much. What if I niche down a 4th time, niching till it hurts, to become the best solution to a real problem? And what was that best solution to a real problem? It was the fact that I was complaining personally that these amazing interview business podcasts only came out once per week. I wanted a 7-day-a-week podcast. None existed. So I created the best solution to a real problem. I created the first daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs coming out 7 days per week. The day I launched, it was the best solution to a real problem. It was a 7-day-a-week podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was also the worst daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. That's why I won. I provided the best solution, the worst solution, the only solution to a real problem. And when you can honestly look in the mirror and say you're doing that, scream it from the rooftops. Yes, be humble, but be confident.
But I went to episode number 1, and it wasn't that bad as you're describing it. It's actually
horrible.
Most people who do their episode number 1, they are like stumbling, stuttering, and you're
horrible.
like
Mine was
so
horrible.
confident.
No, listen, I wasn't that confident, and I wasn't that enthusiastic either. Like, you can hear it in my voice. Like, it's so.
You were reading a little bit, no?
Yeah, I was reading. I was nervous. I was more monotone because I just wasn't able to bring my real personality and just talk naturally. Like, when you get to a good point as a podcaster, as a communicator, it's like you're just speaking. Like, it's like you and me right now, Alan. It's like you and I are hanging out back at your restaurant in Edinburgh, having some food and like just chatting. Like, that's how a conversation, that's how a podcast, that's how it should be. Like, you're just having a natural conversation with a friend. Like, that's how it should be. I wasn't capable of doing that back when I launched. I was inexperienced, naive. I was bad. I was all those things, but I put in the flipping reps. I did a podcast every single day. I practiced. I got better. I improved. And 500 episodes later, I actually wasn't terrible anymore.
You're very, very modest. The question I wanted to ask you is, when someone is searching, so I'm flipping into startup world and solving problems and creating businesses. So let's say, because sometimes we find ourselves that we don't know what is the problem that we were supposed to be solving. We didn't find it yet, or the one that is existing maybe is not painful enough to follow through and build a business on. So what would you recommend to do, and that would help exploring the options and the finding the problems to solve, apart from scratching your own itch, and niching down? But yeah, what would you do to find a problem to solve?
So I would do 2 things. And this is actually step 1 and step 2 of the 17-step roadmap. Step 1, you've got to do what most people will die not having done. And I say that it's dramatic, but it's true. Most people are going to die without ever having sat down and actually identified their big idea. And that's sad, but it's true. They will not have identified their big idea. There's a big idea in every one of you that are here today. There's a big idea in every single human being. And many people will never sit down and actually identify what that big idea is within them. Now, I'm not saying that's enough. Believe me, that's step 1 of 17 steps. That's just a step in the right direction. After you've identified your big idea, your zone of fire, I call it, you move into step 2, which is discover the niche, find the void, find that opportunity in the marketplace that's not being solved. Again, going back to my example, podcast, business podcast, interview, business podcast of entrepreneurs, daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, the best, the worst, the only. That was why I won. That's the niche you've got to get down into. As someone repeated, niche till it hurts. Love it, says Mans Dalvig. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. that's so true. You've got to be willing to niche till it hurts and just be honest with yourself. Like I did, I said, okay, I don't want to be the 8th best business podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. So what do I complain about with these podcasts that I love? I love them. So most of the things about them I love, but if I had to complain about them, what would my complaints be? And the complaint came back. None of them are doing enough quantity. They're doing once a week. I need a podcast waiting for me every single morning when I wake up and I'm about to drive to work. So I identified a massive problem as I saw it within the niche that I had niched down to niche down that 4th and final time until it hurt with a daily podcast. That's the process, but it all came from my big idea, that broad, vague, big idea. And again, I know I'm not going through how to discover your big idea because it's not long, but it's an intensive process, which we break down step by step in this book, like exercises, templates, timers, strategies. And let me just kind of break here for a second and say, listen, I want to be clear. And then I want to move pretty quickly, Alan, on to getting some people up here live because I've got to be gone exactly the top of the hour for my next interview. This book is hard work. Okay. This is the common path to uncommon success. It's not the complicated path. It's not the hidden path. It's not the secret path. But don't think the word common means easy because it is a hard path. Alan worked hard to make his restaurant a success. I worked hard to create Entrepreneurs on Fire and to build what I built over the years. Every entrepreneur I've interviewed of the 3,000s that have had uncommon success, they've worked hard. But you know what else is hard? Being broke, living paycheck to paycheck, waking up every morning, doing what you have to do instead of what you want to do. Looking in the mirror or maybe even avoiding your own eye contact because you know that you're underachieving what you're capable of. And I'm speaking from personal experience. This was 6 years of my life. I was an officer in the Army until 26 years old. And then from 26 to 32, I had 6 years of struggles and failure. Broke, paycheck to paycheck, just disappointed in myself, unhappy, unfulfilled. And then at 32 years old, I came up with an idea for a daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. And I was like, this is going to be hard work. And it was a fork in the road, Alan. It was, do I take this hard path? But I knew the other path was hard too. It was going to be hard to continue going down, being broke, being disappointed in myself, living paycheck to paycheck. So what did I do? I chose my hard. And it was hard to build my dream business. But as I stand here today, I mean, financial freedom, fulfillment, I chose correctly.
Amazing. So one last thing before we get somebody on stage, the people are ready. They're just super keen to ask you questions. What I wanted to know is, like, I know you're fully transparent in everything you do, including your financials and your successes and your lifestyles and your lifestyle in Puerto Rico. And some people are afraid to show their real self, to speak the truth and even show financials. So what would you say to those people who are scared of doing that? Because, you know, in the online world, that seems to be working the best, the transparency.
Listen, fake it till you make it is the worst business advice you'll ever receive. And I really hope nobody came on here earlier and gave you that advice, because I will contradict it to their face if they did. Nobody wants fake. Nobody wants somebody who is just up there, pretending to be what they're not. And human beings, we can smell that a mile away, and boom, your reputation is gone. People want you, real, raw, authentic, genuine you. They want to be rooting for you. Like when I was a terrible podcaster, and don't listen to Alan. Like I was a bad podcaster for a significant amount of time. My audience knew I was too, but they knew I was busting my butt. I was working hard. I was bringing on amazing guests who were sharing value. So my show was still good because of my guests. But then my audience started to see me getting better, and they saw me working hard at getting better. And they were rooting for me, like, John, like, you are really becoming a better, more confident, more well-spoken, like, podcast host. And they were rooting for me because they wanted me to become better, because it was going to make the show better and more valuable for them. And it's, it's like the Rudy story. If anybody's watched the movie Rudy, where it's like this football player, he barely makes the football team and he's terrible, but then he works his way up and he finally gets in the big game. Like, you're rooting for this person. If he had started as the best player on the team and then that was it, like, there's nothing to root for. He's just already on the team. He's the best player. We love the hero's journey. We want to be on your hero's journey because you are a hero, and you got to let people in, be genuine, be transparent, be authentic, and make that happen. And I took people on my journey by showing my income reports, which were basically nothing at the beginning, to where now there are 6 figures every single month for 91 months in a row. And we share it all: transparency, openness. We bring on our lawyer to share a legal tip. We bring on our accountant to share a tax tip. Like, we try to make them as valuable as possible. And one thing I want to share that Mike dropped in the comments, which is one of the hardest things is getting confidence back when it has been knocked. And so one thing I want to make a comment to that is true when you do step 6 incorrectly, which is what every entrepreneur does. Everybody does step 6 wrong, which is creating and joining a mastermind. If you actually do it right and you've created and joined the right masterminds, which is either 3 or 4 people, which follows a very specific structure, which meets once a week at a minimum, which follows other requirements that I go into details on, then you will have an amazing support staff. You will have an amazing community to 3 or 4 people who will support you, who will guide you, who will have your back, who will most importantly hold you accountable and not let your fake cowardness hold you back, but instead hold your feet to the fire and make sure that you win every single week. Because it's so easy when you're trying to do this by yourself to slink off and to let your fear and your cowardness slink off into a corner and you just disappear. And so many people do that because they don't have the accountability group in place, because they don't have the right mastermind in place. The right mastermind will never let you disappear, will never let you slink away. They will make sure that you win.
OMG, I would totally talk to you for hours. Guys, make sure you pre-order the book and let's bring on the questions. So Emma, let's go. Let's do this. We've got 20 minutes on the go.
Go. I'll just quickly say thank you so much, John. It's been an amazing
thank you.
40 minutes. We've filled up so much. And I promise I haven't rigged this, but my question has actually been upvoted to the top. So I'm just going to take liberties and ask mine first, and then I'll bring on some other lovely people. You've interviewed over kind of 3,000 people. Is there still one interviewer who's on your wish list? Who's missing from Entrepreneurs on Fire?
Great question. I'm just going to answer you honestly. Nobody alive. There's some people I'd love to interview that are still alive, but like nobody that I have to interview. I'm a big believer at this stage that the right people find their way to my show, and there's a process through which that happens, and I really love having that mentality. But I'll tell you one person whom I would love to interview is this guy called Benjamin Franklin. He's big in the American history books. He was a big reason for the birth of our nation, and he did a lot of great things. But what I loved most about him was he was such a quirky, funny person that did not take life seriously. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we as entrepreneurs have, is we just take things too seriously. Like, at the end of the day, life is short. Life is quick. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be enjoyed. And he never really forgot that. So like, reading his biography, I'm like, that's a person I'd like to talk to, because I know that I could learn so much from him because of how he lived his life. And to me, that's so important. But great question.
Good. Thank you for that. That was, didn't know what the answer would be, but that was very, very good. Right, I'm going quickly to the next one. We'll fire through these.
Yeah, let's fire through.
I'm going to bring up Joe. I think, Johnny, you're going to help me bring people up. So Joe, to ask your question.
Joe.
Hey, John. Lovely. It was fantastic to hear you. Some great advice. I've been taking notes actually from what you've been saying, because there's some absolute gems in there. Especially that comment about the I think it was from unsolicited advice. The was it enthusiasm is worth
25
25 extra
IQ
IQ points. I text my dad just saying that, because I love that one. So,
Cool.
but anyway, my question to you is, from speaking to so many people and from your own experiences, what's been the most interesting story?
Wow. There's been a lot of interesting stories over the years. I will say probably the most fascinating one. And again, I'm trying not to make too many just like American focused references, because I want everybody, from Scotland to also get what I'm saying as well. But I interviewed this guy named Gene Simmons. He was the singer of a band called Kiss. And if you're familiar with Kiss, I might be able to share with you, like, they were the first people to really paint their faces white with like black lining. I see you're shaking your head, so you might be familiar with them. They had those really long tongues that they kind of like added on to their costumes. Exactly. And like, they were huge. They sold over 100 million records, which is like unheard of. And what it came down to was like Gene Simmons, like when I was interviewing him, he said, listen, we weren't like the best singers. In fact, we were very average. We weren't the best drummers or guitar players or this or that. But what we became the best at was entertainers. We became the best entertainers. And that's why our audience loved us, because they knew that when they came, they were going to get good music, not great music. Because he's like, we weren't great. He's like, there was 1,000 other bands that had better singers than us, had better drummers, had better guitar players, but nobody was going to outperform us. And when you left a Kiss concert, you told everybody, I just had the time of my life. And that's when it just solidified for me. This was back in 2015 when I interviewed him, that when you become the best solution to an actual problem, you're going to win. And they knew they couldn't become the best singers. They couldn't become the best drummers or the best X or Y or Z, but they could become the best entertainers because they figured out how to do that. And that's why they won at such an exponential, disproportionate level. So great question.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Actually, it reminds me of my dad once said that the Beatles were terrible singers, but they were the best songwriters.
So there you go.
And that's why they're good.
And another thing too is, in a way, like, I don't ever want to compare myself to the Beatles, but like hearing their story, I can relate to it because they were terrible. But what did they do? They moved to Germany, and I know their backstory pretty well. And they played for like 3 years, 6 to 7 nights a week. They played more songs and played more performances, but not just by like 1x, by like 10x than any other bands. And that's why they won. And like, for me, like, I was by far, in a way, not the best interviewer by a long shot when I started, but I was the only person that was doing a 7-day-a-week podcast. So when my competitors were doing 50 shows a year, I was doing 365. I just outworked them. I out-hustled them. I out-grinded them. And I, as a result, was doing something called putting in the reps, getting just a little bit better every time. But over 365 days, I put in 365 reps as opposed to 50 of my competitors. Like, who gets good at something doing it 4 times per month? That was my thought. And that's why I did it every single day. So I love the fact you brought the Beatles up. That's why they became great, what they did, because they're amazing songwriters and they put in the reps.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Hope we've not got any too diehard Beatles fans who think they're great singers. I'm sure we'll be fine.
Love it.
Right. So now we have Clemens. I'm going to bring up Clemens. It's so long since we saw you in Scotland.
Oh, yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, it's all good.
All right. Hi. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you. It's been a great talk. I think I'm going to have to rewatch some of those. But anyway, my question was, you said you're not always enthusiastic about what you're doing. And is there something specific you do to get back into the grind, back into the sort of enthusiasm? I guess to make it a bit more specific is, I am a photographer and I love it, but there are days where like, I don't want to pick up a camera. I don't want to do it at all. And so it's like, do you have a specific method, anything specific you do to get back into it?
Great question. So I knew with 100% certainty that when I committed to launching a daily podcast, that I by no means was going to feel like waking up every morning and doing one interview with one entrepreneur. There was 100% going to be at least one day a week, if not multiple days per week. I was going to be like, I just don't feel like doing an interview today. I was 100% positive about that. So what I did which you can do in my world, in the entrepreneurial online world, which you can really figure out how to do in other worlds as well, is like I committed to a process which I call batching like a baller. And what I mean by that is every Tuesday was my interview day. That was the only day per week where I would do any interviews for Entrepreneurs on Fire. So every Tuesday for years, I had 8 interviews scheduled back to back that one day. So in my mindset, I said, this is my Super Bowl. This is my World Cup. I am waking up every Tuesday. I don't care if I feel like crap, which, to me, it can be a mindset thing. I'm not going to be able to get over feeling like crap 7 days a week. It's going to happen. But one day a week, my mind said I was going to get up and I was going to crush 8 interviews. Nothing was going to stop me from being enthusiastic, from being on fire, from being excited about the 8 people that I was going to interview that day. Nothing was going to stop me. And that was just the mentality that carried me through. If I had to have that mentality 7 days a week, it never would have happened. But knowing that I just had to just focus and crush it that one day, and then I had six days till the next time I had to be up like that, that allowed me to just absolutely crush every one of those interviews and keep up with that consistency. So when you can batch, I think it's a fantastic method. And when you can have focused and meaningful recharge and refresh timeframes, it's also critical as well. And even on those days that I interview, I don't start interviewing until 10 a.m. because I have a very specific morning routine, which includes getting outside, going for a walk, having the sun hit me. I come back, I do a workout with my trainer in my gym here, lifting weights. I have an infrared sauna, so I'm in the sauna for 30 minutes, just sweating it out. I don't have this yet, but it's actually coming in on March 17th. I have a cold plunge. I'm going to start going into my cold plunge for 3 minutes a day just to get, fully charged up as well. And then I have a little chair by my pool where I'm going to sit out and I'm going to journal for 15 minutes, just get things out of my head. I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes. Then I'm going to read like a business book, a pleasure book, whatever it might be, for a minimum 20 minutes. And like that's a morning routine so that by the time I come up here into my studio, which is where I'm at now, and it's like now it's 9 a.m. or 9:30, I have about 30 minutes before the actual interview starts. I have just serviced like myself. Like I have just, filled up my energy cup in that great morning. And so that I can now give back to everybody that I'm interviewing throughout that entire day. And that's a big help for me. And I see you've got a sweatshirt, Kathmandu. And I will tell you, I did the Annapurna Trek, which is one of the 10 highest mountains in the world. I did it to the base camp, and it was a fantastic trek.
All right, thanks. I really appreciate your advice.
Thank you very much. Okay, and we're on to the next one. We've got Edward, and then invite Edward up.
Hi, all right. Thank you very much for your talk for the last kind of 40 minutes. It's been really interesting to take notes and think about. My question is kind of a strange one. I'll try and word it as best I can. So can you remember the first time you said yes to an opportunity, said yes to a potential client, whoever, kind of saying to them, yes, I can do that, without kind of truly knowing the how? It's like you've leapt for the opportunity, you have the kind of theory in your head, you could do it, but it's perhaps something you've not done before. Like, to relate it to me, for example, like in marketing, we'll say yes to an opportunity we really want, and we've been kind of presented with the opportunity. And, there might be a few areas we're not 100% on, but taking that leap and actually doing it has paid off literally every single time for us, touch wood, so far. So can you remember a time for you where you said that, and are you glad you took that leap?
So number one, I'm a huge believer in that all the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. Like all the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. So many people are living in the comfort zone, which is where no magic happens. And it's where they're just comfortable doing something. So for your example, to be like, you're really good at doing these 3 or 4 things in the marketing world. And like, so you only do those 3 or 4 things, and therefore that's all you ever do. But when you stretch yourself, when you push the envelope, when you get outside of your comfort zone, magic happens. You've experienced it multiple times now. I've experienced it as well. And a great example from my perspective was I launched my podcast in September 2012. 3 months later, I hit like episode 100 because I'm doing 3 a day. I'm doing 1 a day for 30 days a month. And I got a message from somebody that said, hey, you're going to, I see that you're an attendee at this upcoming conference called New Media Expo, which was the biggest conference back in 2012 in the world of social media and online marketing. I see you're an attendee. It's in Vegas. We just had a speaker in the podcasting space drop out. Will you come and speak about podcasting? And when I got the email, I was like, absolutely not. What does this person realize? I just launched my podcast. Like, they saw 100 episodes. So they thought I was an like this seasoned pro, but like, they maybe didn't realize that I had done 100 episodes in 100 days. So I was still like a fresh newbie. So whatever it was, they were just like assuming that I was this like experienced podcaster. I knew I wasn't. But then I was just like, immediately I was like, no, I can't get on stage and talk about podcasting. Who am I to talk about podcasting? I'm barely podcasting myself. But before I sent that email, I said, you know what, John? Your comfort zone is to say no here, but all the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. So before I could even think about it, I didn't try to like plan out my talk or do anything else. I just sent an immediate yes to lock myself in so I couldn't change my mind. And then I said, okay, now we sit down and now we figure this out because there's no other option. And by the way, I gave a really terrible talk. Like, I was up there stumbling over words, looking down at my shoes, pacing back and forth, not impressive in any way, shape, or form. But I got my first talk under my belt. I got a little bit better the next time. Now, even though my talk was pretty bad, people really after that just saw that I was a speaker at this conference. They didn't really necessarily know that my talk sucked. They just knew that I was a speaker. And so they got invited to another conference to talk and another conference to talk. And I got a little bit better each time. And before long, now I'm actually kind of decent at speaking, and I'm speaking in front of 3,000 people as the opening keynote at some of the biggest conferences around the world. And it all came from me hitting that yes, send.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
So I think we got time for like maybe one more question. I will say this has been an awesome hour. I am back to back today, trying to provide value to all the awesome people in the world, including Scotland. And it's been really cool hanging out, like I said, with all these people with just much better accents than me.
Oh, thank you very much.
Remember, you have the power to select our final one. Our Slido has the power.
I mean, we have so many wonderful questions. So I just, whoever still has questions, reach out to us or put them in a forum or his book or listen to more podcasts. I'm sure their answers will be there somewhere. And
Johnny, by the way, thanks for grabbing the copy, brother. Much appreciated.
Of course, everyone else get on it. Yes, get on it, guys.
So I'm going to be fair, and I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm going to bring up Kim. So a slightly different question. But again, everybody always, put those questions out there and don't be, or come along to another event.
Hi there, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Super. So I was wondering, if you were starting out today from nothing, 2021, do you think you would do a podcast, or what would you do?
So if I launch Entrepreneurs on Fire as I launched it in 2012, in 2021, it fails miserably because, listen, podcasting has gotten more saturated. It's gotten so much more competitive, and just a podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, it just doesn't hack it anymore. Back in 2012, it hacked it. Now it doesn't anymore. I mean, my show does because I had the first mover advantage. I've grown a massive audience. I have 1.4 million monthly listens. I'm actually good now at podcasting. I used to suck. So, your question, like, I suck in 2021 now. When I'm starting this podcast, it fails because it's just not good enough, and it's not unique enough, and it's not different enough. Podcasting is still an amazing opportunity, but just like everything, and this goes for podcasting, this goes for anything you're going to do, you have to do what I said with those first two steps. Come up with, what is your big idea? Like, that's unique and special to you. And again, there's a whole process I can't go into super detail about, but it's not overly complicated. And then how do you discover the niche that's not being filled, the void that you can serve better than anybody else? So I personally, because I love the platform of podcasting, I would still do a podcast, but it would be a super specific, super niche podcast. And like just throwing something out without giving it like super deep thought, but just like what comes to mind right now. Like, I'm really passionate about up-leveling my sleep right now. Like, I'm really trying to hack my sleep because I know as I get into my 40s and beyond that like sleep is something that I need terribly to stay sharp, to stay energized, to help my longevity and all the things. So I'm working really hard to learn all I can about sleep. So maybe I launch a podcast that's like becomes the best podcast about getting the best 8 hours of sleep every single night. And I focus on becoming the best show doing that. So not a broad, vague topic about entrepreneurs on fire, interviewing all the successful business types around the world. That show crushed it in 2012 and is still crushing it in 2021 because I built it over a decade. I had the first mover advantage and I'm still building off of this brand, which now means something. It fails miserably in 2021 and launching the same concept with me as a poor host and all that jazz. But a unique, special, very focused podcast on one topic that turns into the best solution for a real problem, which is people struggling, getting sleep at night. Like that podcast wins. And like that wins because for one reason, because I'm actually interested about it. So I'm going to learn a lot about it. And that's part of this coming up with your big idea, like passions, excitement, enthusiasm. But then also there's a whole process about your skills, your knowledge, your expertise that has to be factored into that zone of fire as well. So that's what I do in 2021.
Amazing. And I'm sure somebody's going to take you on this advice.
Should.
And just before you go, I know you're probably sick of all the fire puns, but I actually have to run and extinguish my computer. So thank you very much, John. That was amazing. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to meet you, to hear what you have to say. Thank you for saying yes. I hope we're going to meet again. Maybe you'll visit Scotland again. If not, somewhere in the entrepreneurial world after those ripples spread around the world, we'll meet each other again. So thank you so much. And everyone who attended today, if you just stay for another few minutes, we'll talk you through the next event. But again, I'm blessed to be able to do this with you guys. So thank you so much.
Go Scotland.